The rain hammered down on the cracked asphalt outside the emergency room doors, turning the night into a blurred watercolor of red taillights and flickering neon. Inside the sterile chaos of Mercy General Hospital, a young mother clutched her toddler to her chest, her face pale and streaked with tears. The boy, no more than 4, whimpered softly, his tiny arm twisted at an unnatural angle from a fall down the stairs slick with spilled liquor from his father's drunken rage. Nurses bustled past, their scrubs stained with the evidence of a long shift, but no one stopped. The waiting room was a war zone of suffering, an elderly man gasping for breath, a car accident victim bleeding through his bandages, and now this broken family, invisible in the shuffle. Security guard Harlan Tate, a burly man with a badge that meant power in these halls, loomed over the mother like a storm cloud. "Ma'am, we've told you 3 times. No loitering. If you can't pay the bill up front, you gotta go. We ain't a charity." His voice boomed, echoing off the linoleum floors, drawing stares from the weary crowd. The mother, Sarah Klein, exhausted, her dark hair matted from the downpour, begged, her voice cracking. "Please, my baby, he needs help. It's just a fracture, but the pain—" Harlan's hand clamped on her shoulder, steering her toward the exit. The toddler's cries pierced the air, a sound that twisted like a knife in the gut of anyone with a heart. Outside, the rain swallowed them whole, leaving Sarah huddled under the awning, rocking her son as thunder rolled in the distance. But then, cutting through the storm like a blade, came the low growl of engines. A single motorcycle pulled up to the curb, its chrome gleaming wet under the streetlights. The rider killed the motor, dismounting with the grace of someone who'd spent years on the road. She was tall, her leather jacket scarred from countless miles, a helmet tucked under one arm, revealing short-cropped auburn hair plastered by the rain. Dr. Elena Voss, though no one in that moment knew her name or her secrets, strode toward the doors, her boots splashing through puddles. Harlan, spotting her approach, puffed out his chest. "Hold it right there, this area's off limits." Elena's eyes, sharp as flint under the brim of her jacket's hood, locked onto him. She didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice. Instead, she glanced at Sarah and the boy, assessing in an instant the swelling, the unnatural bend, the signs of neglect that went deeper than the bone. That child needs setting, pain meds, and a social worker. Now. Her tone was calm, authoritative, the kind that came from years of stitching up wounds in back-alley clinics and ER bays alike. Harlan snorted, blocking her path. "And who the hell are you? Some biker chick playing doctor. Get lost before I call the cops." The doors hissed open behind him, spilling out the fluorescent glow. But Elena didn't budge. Rain dripped from her jacket, pooling at her feet like spilled blood. She reached into her pocket, pulling out a worn leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal not just ID, but a cascade of credentials, medical license, hospital affiliate card, and something more. A faded patch from the Iron Vipers Motorcycle Club, stitched with the emblem of a coiled serpent. "I'm Dr. Elena Voss, Chief Trauma Surgeon for Mercy General's overflow shifts, and that woman and her kid. They're under my care now." Harlan's face reddened, his bluster faltering as he scanned the IDs, the weight of his mistake sinking in. But pride was a stubborn thing. He grabbed her arm, yanking her toward the rain. "I don't care who you think you are. Rules are rules. Out!" The shove sent Elena stumbling into the downpour, her wallet splashing into a puddle. Sarah gasped, shielding her son, but Elena rose like a phoenix from the wet asphalt, water streaming down her face. In that moment, something ancient stirred in her, a promise made decades ago, under a desert sky thick with dust and the roar of engines. Back then, as a wide-eyed medic, fresh from the war zones of her youth, she'd sworn to her fallen comrade Jake Harlan, no relation to the guard. But the name twisted fate like a bad omen. to protect the innocent, no matter the cost. The Iron Vipers weren't just a club, they were her chosen family, bound by blood, leather, and unbreakable oaths. And tonight, that oath was calling her back. She straightened, wiping mud from her cheek, her voice low and steady as she pulled out her phone. "You just made a big mistake, Harlan." The first call went out, a text to the club president, her old war buddy, Marcus Hale. Within minutes, the night air vibrated with the thunder of approaching bikes. Headlights pierced the rain like searchlights, a convoy of 20 Vipers rolling in formation, their engines a symphony of defiance. Marcus led the pack, his massive frame dwarfing the custom chopper, pulling up beside Eleanor. He dismounted, clapping a hand on her shoulder, his grizzled beard flecked with raindrops. "Doc, what's the play?" Eleanor nodded toward the doors, where Harlan now backed away, eyes wide at the sea of leather and chrome. "They threw out a mom and her hurt kid. Security's got no clue who they're messing with." Marcus's jaw tightened, memories flashing in his eyes, of Elena saving his life in a roadside ambush years back, of the promise they'd all made to stand for the forgotten. He turned to his crew, voice booming over the storm. "Vipers, we ride for the helpless. Tonight we remind this town what honor looks like." The group moved as one, a wall of solidarity flooding the ER lobby. Nurses froze, patients whispered, and Harlan stammered into his radio, but it was too late. Elena scooped up the toddler gently, her hands sure and warm, while Sarah followed, hope flickering in her eyes for the first time. As the bikes idled outside, their rumble a heartbeat of justice, Elena set the boy's arm, her touch a bridge between the world's cruelty and its quiet redemptions. This was just the beginning, a single act that would unravel secrets buried deeper than the rain-soaked streets, pulling Elena back into the shadows of her past, where old enemies lurked and loyalties were tested like steel in fire. But in the glow of the hospital lights, as the convoy formed a protective circle, one thing was clear. The Vipers didn't just ride, they redeemed. And Elena Voss, scarred by losses that haunted her dreams, the brother she couldn't save, the war that stole her innocence, knew this promise would bind them all, changing lives in ways the storm couldn't wash away. The convoy didn't leave until the boy was stabilized, his cries fading to soft breaths under morphine's embrace. Sarah, tears mixing with rain on her cheeks, whispered thanks to Elena, who only nodded, her mind already racing ahead. Word spread through the club like wildfire. The hospital had crossed the wrong doctor. By dawn, more riders would arrive, not for vengeance, but for vigilance. A silent guard against the corruption festering in those white walls. Elena mounted her bike, the engine's purr vibrating through her bones, a reminder of the road that had forged her. As they peeled out into the night, tail-lights fading like fireflies, the city slept unaware that justice had revved to life. Yet deep in her pocket, Elena felt the weight of an old letter, yellowed with time, from Jake. "Keep the faith, Doc, for the ones who can't." Tonight she'd honored it, but tomorrow, the real ride began. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon like a hesitant witness, painting the hospital parking lot in shades of bruised purple and gold. Elena Voss guided her bike to a stop at the edge of the lot, the engine's rumble fading into the quiet hum of early traffic. The Iron Vipers had dispersed through the night, some peeling off to their garages, others lingering like sentinels in the shadows of nearby alleys. Marcus Hale pulled up beside her, his chopper's exhaust popping softly as he killed the ignition. He swung a leg over, his boots crunching on the gravel, and fixed her with that steady gaze, the one that had pulled him through sandstorms and skirmishes alike. "You good, Doc?" His voice was gravelly, laced with the weariness of a man who'd traded dog tags for leather vests, but never shaken the soldier's vigilance. Elena nodded, though her fingers tightened on the handlebars, the leather grips worn smooth from years of gripping fate. The rain had eased to a drizzle, leaving the air heavy with the scent of wet earth and cooling metal. Inside her jacket, the old letter from Jake pressed against her ribs like a talisman, its words a ghost that refused to fade. She'd honored a piece of it last night, stepping in for Sarah and the boy. But promises like theirs didn't end with one rescue. They echoed, demanding more. Sarah Klein had stayed with her son through the night, the ER staff finally relenting under the weight of the Viper's presence. The boy's arm was set, a cast wrapping his small limb like a shield against the world's indifference, as Elena had worked, her hands steady despite the ache in her own shoulder, a souvenir from a long-ago crash. Sarah had gripped her forearm, eyes shining with unspoken gratitude. You came out of nowhere, like an answer to a prayer I didn't know how to say. Elena had only murmured, "Family looks out for its own," but the words hung heavy, stirring memories of Jake's laugh under a merciless sun, his promise to her. "Watch my back, Doc, and I'll watch yours, in this life or the next." Now, as the hospital stirred to life, ambulances wailing in the distance, Elena dismounted and scanned the lot. A few Vipers were still there, nursing coffees from a thermos, their bikes lined up like iron guardians. One of them, a wiry vet named Tyler Grant, nodded her way, his tattooed arms crossed over his chest. "Heard the kid's stable. Good call last night." But Elena's mind was elsewhere, piecing together the fragments of Harlan Tate's bluster. The guard's radio call hadn't gone unanswered. She could feel it in the prickling tension. The way the lobby lights seemed to buzz with unspoken threats. Marcus followed her gaze to the ER doors, where a cluster of suits had gathered, hospital admins, their clipboards like badges of bureaucracy. Leading them was Dr. Leonard Pierce, the chief of staff, a man whose polished shoes and starched collar hid a reputation for cutting corners to balance budgets. Elena had crossed paths with him before, during overflow shifts, when the Vipers brought in their own, road-weary brothers nursing fractures from bar fights or wipeouts. Pierce tolerated her, but only just, viewing the club as a liability, a shadow over his pristine institution. "They're coming for you," Marcus said, his hand resting on the hilt of a knife at his belt, not for show, but for the comfort of readiness. Elena straightened, the drizzle beading on her jacket like unshed tears. "Let them. I've got nothing to hide." But that was a lie she told herself in the mirror each morning. Her past wasn't just scars. It was a web of secrets, starting with Jake's death in that dusty outpost where she'd failed to save him from the shrapnel that tore through his chest. The Vipers had been her anchor then, pulling her from the abyss, binding her with oaths forged in grief. Chief medic for the club wasn't a title. It was a vow, one that clashed with the hospital's rigid codes. The doors swung open, and Pierce strode out, Harlan Tate trailing like a whipped dog, his uniform rumpled from a sleepless night. 2 more security guards flanked them, hands hovering near their belts. "Dr. Voss!" Pierce called, his voice clipped and authoritative, echoing across the lot. "A word, if you please." Elena met him halfway, Marcus and Tyler falling in step behind her, a silent wall of leather and loyalty. The admin's eyes flicked nervously to the bikes, the low murmur of engines from the lingering Vipers underscoring the standoff. "You caused quite the scene last night," Pierce began, adjusting his glasses, the morning light glinting off the lenses like a barrier. "Bikers flooding the ER? It's unprofessional, disruptive. And that guard, Harlan here, says you assaulted him." Harlan shifted, avoiding Elena's gaze, the red mark on his arm from her shove hidden under his sleeve. A mere suggestion of resistance rather than outright violence. Elena didn't rise to the bait. "I intervened for a patient in need. The mother couldn't pay, so security ejected her and her injured child into the rain. That's not protocol, that's negligence." Her words cut clean, honed by years of advocating in courtrooms disguised as exam rooms. Pierce's lips thinned, but he pressed on. Be that as it may, your affiliations complicate things. The board's reviewing your privileges. Unofficial clubs like yours bring risks, lawsuits, bad press. We can't have vigilante medicine here. Marcus stepped forward, his presence a low thunder. Vigilante? We stood for a kid who needed help. What's your excuse? The admins bristled, but Pierce held up a hand. This is a business, Mr. Hale, not a crusade. Dr. Voss, you're suspended pending investigation. Hand over your badge. The words landed like a punch, the drizzle turning colder against Elena's skin. Suspended. It meant more than lost shifts. It severed her tie to the hospital, the place where she'd rebuilt after Jake, stitching lives while her own frayed at the edges. Tyler's voice broke the silence, calm but edged. You sure about this? Words spreading. More of us are coming, friends, allies. We don't forget slights. The threat was subtle, wrapped in the club's code. Not retaliation, but unyielding support. Pierce paled slightly, glancing at the growing line of headlights approaching from the east. Another wave of Vipers, summoned by texts in the night, their engines a distant roar, building like a storm. Elena unclipped her badge, the metal cool in her palm, and held Pierce's stare. This isn't over. That family, and others like them, deserve better than your gates. She dropped the badge into his hand, turning back to her bike. But as she mounted up, the letter in her pocket seemed to burn, Jake's handwriting a call to arms. Suspension was just the spark. Deeper fires smoldered in the hospital's underbelly. Rumors of falsified records, patients turned away for profit, echoes of the corruption that had claimed Jake's unit back in the day. The convoy reformed around her, bikes kicking to life in a symphony of defiance. Marcus revved his engine, falling in beside her. Where to, Doc? Eleanor's eyes scanned the horizon, the city awakening oblivious to the rift widening beneath its streets. Back to the clubhouse. We've got planning to do. This promise, it's pulling us in deeper. As they rode out, the wind whipping her hair, Elena felt the weight of chosen kin at her back. The Vipers, unbreakable, a family forged in loss and lit by quiet honor. Harlan watched from the doors, regret flickering in his eyes. But Elena didn't look back. The road ahead twisted with shadows, testing loyalties and unearthing truths that could shatter more than badges. Justice wasn't a sprint. It was a ride through the dark, 1 mile at a time. The clubhouse loomed on the outskirts of town like a fortress carved from weathered brick and rusted iron, its walls scarred by decades of storms and stories. Elena Voss eased her bike into the gravel lot, the tires crunching softly as the engine sighed to silence. The sun climbed higher now, casting long shadows from the line of choppers parked in precise rows, each one a testament to the lives that had roared across highways and heartaches. Marcus Hale dismounted beside her, his boots kicking up dust that danced in the morning light, while Tyler Grant and a handful of others pulled in behind, forming a loose circle around the fire pit that hadn't seen flames since the last full moon gathering. Inside, the air hung thick with the scent of aged leather, stale coffee, and the faint tang of motor oil that seeped from every corner. The main room was a patchwork of memories, faded photos of rides pinned to corkboards, a shelf of dog-eared books on mechanics and philosophy, and the central table scarred from countless strategy sessions. Eleanor shrugged off her jacket, hanging it on a hook by the door, the weight of the suspension badge's absence settling in her chest like a stone. Jake's letter crinkled in her pocket, a quiet companion urging her forward. She'd lost badges before. Med school credentials buried in a drawer after the war, licenses challenged by bureaucrats who couldn't grasp the grit of frontline healing. But this felt different, a fracture in the fragile bridge between her worlds. The club president, an elder Viper named Ronan Black, broad-shouldered with silver threading his beard, rose from his chair at the head of the table, where maps and ledgers lay scattered like battle plans. His eyes, sharp despite the lines etched by time, locked onto Elena's. "Heard the call last night, Doc. Sounds like the suits are circling." His voice rumbled low, carrying the cadence of someone who'd stared down worse than hospital hacks, desert ambushes, barroom betrayals, the kind that tested oaths to their breaking point. Around the table, the core crew nodded. Lena Torres, a former nurse with ink-black hair and a gaze that could disarm a drunk, and Caleb Reed, the club's quiet enforcer, his hands calloused from wrenching engines and righting wrongs. Elena slid into a seat, the wooden chair creaking under her, and laid out the night's events like cards on a table. Sarah's desperation, Harlan's shove, Pierce's ultimatum. She kept her tone even, but the undercurrent of fire simmered, fueled by the promise she'd made to Jake under that blood-red sunset, to shield the vulnerable, to cut through the red tape that strangled the suffering. "It's not just about me," she said, her fingers tracing the serpent emblem on the table's edge. "That hospital's rotten from the inside, turning away kids like Sarah's. It's the start. I've seen the charts. Patients ghosted for unpaid bills, meds shorted to cut costs. Pierce is the tip of the iceberg." Ronan leaned back, his chair groaning in protest, and lit a cigar, the smoke curling upward like a signal flare. "And the kid, stable?" Eleanor nodded, a ghost of a smile breaking through. "Arms set. Social services got involved. Viper's presence sped that up. Sarah's got a safe place now, one of our safe houses on the edge of town." The room murmured approval, a ripple of solidarity that bound them tighter than blood. These weren't outlaws chasing thrills. They were guardians, pieced together from broken vets and wanderers, sworn to the code Jake had helped etch into their souls before a roadside blast claimed him. Elena had been there that day, her hands slick with his blood, whispering vows over the roar of evacuation choppers. "For the forgotten," he'd gasped, and she'd carried it like a brand ever since. But talk turned to strategy, the air growing taut as they mapped the next move. Tyler sketched a rough diagram on a napkin, the hospital's layout, entry points, the admin's offices buried in the admin wing. "We can't storm the place," Caleb said, his voice a low drawl, eyes flicking to Elena for confirmation. "Not our way, but eyes on the ground? We can watch, document, get proof of the rot." Lena chimed in, her medic's precision cutting through. "I've got contacts inside, nurses tired of the games, whispers of falsified reports, donors pulling strings. If we link it to Pierce, we bury him without a fist thrown." Elena's mind raced, piecing the puzzle. Suspension stripped her access, but the Viper's network was a web spanning towns, mechanics who overheard truckers, bartenders who eavesdropped on suits. Yet doubt gnawed at her, a shadow from the past. The inquiry after Jake's death, where officials buried the truth under stacks of paperwork, blaming friendly fire to cover their cuts to supplies. She'd fought then, lost everything but her resolve, and washed up with the club, trading scalpels for saddlebags. Now history echoed, threatening to drag Sarah's boy into its undertow. "We start small," she decided, her voice steady as the club's heartbeat. "Surveillance tonight. I'll go in undercover. Volunteer shift, no badge needed. You all cover the perimeter." Ronan stubbed out his cigar, the ember dying with a hiss. "Risky, Doc. If they spot you." But he trailed off, knowing her steel. The meeting broke with nods and clasps of hands, the family chosen in motion. As Elena stepped outside, the midday sun warming the gravel underfoot, Marcus caught up, his stride matching hers toward the bikes. "You carrying that letter again?" he asked, not needing to see it to know. She patted her pocket, the paper's edge a talisman against the tide. "Always. Jake's watching." Marcus grunted, mounting his ride. "Then we ride for him, too." By afternoon, the plan solidified. Scouts fanning out to tail Pierce, Lena digging into records through back channels. Elena prepped in the clubhouse garage, swapping her leathers for scrubs scavenged from a supply run, her hair tied back to blend into the hospital's hive. The scent of antiseptic clung to the fabric, a bitter reminder of the life she'd bridged. As she revved her bike toward town, the wind carrying whispers of thunder on the horizon, she felt the pull, the promise uncoiling like the viper's serpent, drawing her into the fray. But in the rear view, a black sedan trailed at a distance, its tinted windows hiding watchful eyes. Pierce's doing? Or something older, unearthed from her war-torn files? The road curved ahead, flanked by dusty fields that stretched like forgotten battlegrounds, and Elena accelerated, the engine's growl a vow renewed. Justice didn't roar, it revved mile by mile, binding the lost to the light. Sarah's grateful call buzzed in her pocket mid-ride. The boy was laughing, his cast a badge of survival. It fueled her, a spark against the gathering storm. Back at the hospital that evening, shadows lengthening across the lot, Elena slipped through a side door, her volunteer alias holding at the desk. Harlan avoided her gaze, shuffling papers like a man haunted, while nurses whispered of the biker's vigil. Deeper in, she accessed a terminal in a dim alcove, fingers flying over keys to pull files, patterns emerging, denied care, inflated bills, a trail leading to Pierce's offshore accounts. Heart pounding, she downloaded what she could onto a hidden drive, the screen's glow illuminating the resolve in her eyes. Outside, the Vipers idled in the dusk, headlights piercing the twilight like beacons. Tyler radioed in, "Sedan circling. Keep sharp." Elena's response was a whisper to the night, "For the promise," as alarms flickered faintly in the distance, not hers, but a deeper alert in the system's core. The web tightened, loyalties tested, and the ride plunged into uncharted dark. Redemption waited at the end, but the path demanded everything. The dim glow of the terminal screen cast flickering shadows across Elena Voss's face, turning her features into a mask of determination etched in blue light. Her fingers danced over the keys with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel, pulling up file after file from the hospital's encrypted database. The alcove was a forgotten corner of the admin wing, shelves stacked with dusty binders that smelled of mildew and neglect, the air conditioner humming a monotonous drone that masked the soft clicks of her work. Outside, through the narrow window slit, the Viper's headlights pierced the encroaching dusk like watchful eyes, their engines idling in a low, reassuring rumble that vibrated through the walls. Patterns emerged on the screen like veins in marble, denied treatments for low-income families, bills inflated to squeeze donations from shadowy donors, and a trail of redirected funds leading straight to Dr. Leonard Pierce's private accounts. Elena's breath caught as she uncovered a memo dated months back, authorizing the cutoff of services to non-viable patients to meet quarterly targets. Sarah Klein's name wasn't alone. Dozens more flickered by, ghosts of the overlooked, their stories buried under layers of legalese. It hit her like the recoil of a long-forgotten rifle, the same rot that had starved Jake's unit of supplies in that godforsaken outpost where bureaucracy had signed his death warrant as surely as the shrapnel. "For the forgotten," she'd sworn then, her voice lost in the chopper's whine as they airlifted his body away. Now, that vow coiled tighter, pulling her deeper into the web. A faint beep from the system jolted her, security protocols triggering, the download bar stalling at 87%. Elena's pulse quickened, the scent of her own sweat mixing with the antiseptic haze. She yanked the drive free, slipping it into her scrubs pocket just as footsteps echoed down the corridor, heavy and purposeful. Harlan Tate rounded the corner first, his bulk filling the doorway, eyes widening in recognition. "You," he growled, his hand dropping to his radio. "What the hell are you doing back here? You're suspended. Trespassing now." Behind him loomed Pierce, his face a thunderhead of vindication, flanked by two more guards whose grips tightened on their batons. The chief of staff's voice sliced through the tension, smooth as polished steel. "Dr. Voss, or should I say infiltrator, we've been monitoring access logs. Stealing data? That's felony territory." Elena rose slowly, her stance unyielding, the volunteer badge clipped to her chest, a flimsy shield against the storm. She met Pierce's gaze, unflinching, the weight of Jake's letter in her other pocket a silent anchor. "Stealing? I'm exposing truth. The kind that gets kids like Sarah's turned away while you line your pockets." Harlan lunged forward, grabbing her arm with a vice-like hold, the fabric of her scrubs twisting under his fingers. Pain shot through her old shoulder injury, a dull fire from that desert crash years ago, but Elena didn't cry out. Instead, she twisted free with a move honed from club self-defense drills. Quick, efficient, leaving Harlan stumbling into a shelf that rained binders to the floor, papers scattered like fallen leaves, memos fluttering open to reveal more damning evidence, emails coordinating with a corporate backer, promises of kickbacks for streamlined care. Pierce's composure cracked, his glasses slipping down his nose as he barked into his phone. "Security to admin wing, now, and get the police en route." The scuffle drew eyes from passing staff, nurses pausing in the hall with wide stares, whispers rippling like wind through dry grass. Elena backed toward the window, her mind racing through escape routes. The side door she'd slipped through, now likely guarded, or a riskier dash to the main lot where the Vipers waited. Loyalty surged in her veins, hot and unyielding. Marcus Tyler Ronan. They were out there, bound by the same oath that had pulled her from the war's wreckage. "You think this ends with me," she said, voice low and steady, cutting through the chaos. "The Vipers see everything. We've got your ledgers, your lies. This hospital's promise to heal. You've broken it for profit." Pierce sneered, stepping closer, his cologne cloying in the confined space. "Promises? You're a relic, Voss, a biker medic playing hero. The board knows your history. That inquiry after your military stint, the questions about negligence in the field. One call, and your license is dust." The words landed like barbs, dredging up the nightmare of Jake's death, the official report blaming her for delayed evac. Ignoring the supply shortages that left her kit empty, she'd carried that scar, letting it forge her into the club's chief healer, trading sterile ORs for roadside patches under starlit skies. But doubt flickered, a psychological tremor. Was she dragging her chosen family into a fight that could shatter them? Alarms blared suddenly, red lights pulsing through the corridors like a heartbeat gone wild. Not just from her breach, but a cascade failure in the system, files locking down as digital walls rose. Harlan recovered, charging again, but Eleanor sidestepped, her boot connecting with his knee in a controlled sweep that dropped him, groaning. She bolted then, scrubs flapping as she sprinted down the hall, dodging a nurse's cart that clattered in her wake. The side door loomed ahead, but guards blocked it, their shadows merging with the twilight outside. Desperation clawed at her until the roar of engines shattered the night, the Vipers surging forward like a tide of chrome and resolve. Marcus Hale led the breach, his chopper jumping the low barrier into the lot, tires spitting gravel as he and Tyler dismounted in a blur. "Doc!" Marcus bellowed, his voice a beacon over the din, clearing a path with sheer presence. The guards hesitated, batons raised but faltering against the wall of leather-clad figures fanning out, Lena Torres slipping in to grab Elena's arm, pulling her toward the bikes. "We got your signal," Lena whispered, her grip firm. Eyes fierce with the shared fire of nurses who'd seen too much neglect, Caleb Reed revved his engine nearby, creating a barrier as Pierce emerged, shouting orders that dissolved into the thunder. Elena mounted her bike behind Marcus, the drive secure in her pocket, the wind whipping her hair as they peeled out, tail lights streaked red through the dusk, the convoy weaving through traffic with the precision of a unit on maneuvers. Heart pounding, she glanced back, the hospital receding, its lights a distant constellation of secrets unearthed. Pierce's sedan gave chase briefly, but the Viper's numbers swallowed the road, forcing it to veer off. In the rush, Elena felt the ethical tightrope snap taut. Exposing the corruption meant risking charges, dragging innocents like Sarah into the spotlight. Yet the promise demanded it, Jake's words echoing, "Keep the faith for the ones who can't." Back at the clubhouse, under the harsh fluorescence of the garage, the crew gathered around the scarred table. Eleanor plugged in the drive, projecting files onto a makeshift screen, a salvaged TV flickering to life. Ronan's face hardened as the evidence scrolled. Names, dates, the cold calculus of greed. "This goes public," he rumbled. "But smart. Lawyers first. Our guy in the city, the one who handled the bar fight settlements?" Tyler nodded, cracking his knuckles not in anger but resolve. "And we protect the witnesses. Sarah's top of the list." As the night deepened, stars pricking the velvet sky outside, Elena stepped onto the porch, the cool air carrying the distant hum of highways. Marcus joined her, handing over a steaming mug of black coffee, its bitterness grounding her. "Close call back there," he said, his gaze on the horizon. "Worth it?" She sipped, the warmth spreading like the club's unbreaking bond. "For Jake. For them. Yeah." But in her core, the dilemma lingered. Justice's cost, measured in suspended licenses and shadowed sedans. The ride pressed on, loyalties forging ahead into the unknown, where redemption waited not in victory, but in the stand itself. If this chapter stirred something in you, hit that like button below. It helps these stories of quiet courage reach more hearts in need. Word count, 872. The clubhouse garage buzzed with the low hum of fluorescent lights and the clatter of tools being laid out on the workbench, casting elongated shadows across the concrete floor like fingers reaching for secrets. Elena Voss leaned against the scarred table, the drive's contents still projected on the flickering screen, a digital mosaic of betrayal that hung in the air, heavier than the scent of engine grease and cooling coffee. Ronan's cigar smoke lingered from earlier, a hazy veil that softened the edges of the room, but did nothing to dull the sharpness in her eyes. The evidence was ironclad, memos, transfers, the cold trail of greed snaking through the hospital's veins. But victory felt distant, fragile as the first light cracking the horizon. Marcus Hale paced nearby, his boots echoing a restless rhythm, the silver chains on his vest glinting with each turn. "Lawyers en route from the city," he said, his voice a gravelly anchor in the tension. "Says he's got a contact at the state board, can push for an audit without tipping Pierce off too soon." And then Tyler Grant nodded from his perch on a stool, wiping oil from his hands with a rag that had seen better days, his tattooed forearms flexing as he studied the screen. "We sit tight then. No rash moves. But that sedan from last night? Spotted it again, tailing Lena on her way back from the safe house." The words landed like a spark on dry tinder, igniting murmurs around the circle, Lena Torres crossing her arms, her dark eyes narrowing, Caleb Reed cracking his knuckles, a quiet storm brewing in his silence. Elena's fingers traced the edge of Jake's letter in her pocket, the paper worn thin from countless readings, its ink a faded map to the man she'd failed. The war had taught her that corruption didn't strike once. It festered, claiming lives in slow drips, the supplies withheld, the evac delayed, the truth buried under official stamps. Pierce's empire echoed that, a modern outpost where the vulnerable paid the price for someone else's ambition. Sarah Klein's face flashed in her mind. The young mother's relief when she'd called earlier, the boy's laughter a fragile melody over the line. "He's asking for you. The doctor who fixed his wing," Sarah had said, voice thick with emotion. It bound Elena tighter to the oath, the one whispered over Jake's still form. Protect the innocent, honor the forgotten, no matter the shadows that followed. Ronan broke the hush, his broad frame settling into the chair with a creak that commanded attention. "We protect our own first. Double guards on the safe houses. Sarah, the boy, any witnesses we pull in." His gaze settled on Elena, probing the weariness she tried to mask. "And you, Doc? That shoulder holding?" She rolled it experimentally, the old ache flaring like a ghost from the desert crash, the night her bike had skidded on black ice after a long-haul ride, mirroring the chaos of an ambush she'd barely survived with Jake. "It's fine," she lied. The club's code, demanding strength, not vulnerability. But inside, the psychological weight pressed. Suspension was one cut, but exposure could unravel everything. The license she'd clawed back, the fragile peace with her past. The Vipers were family, chosen in the forge of loss, but dragging them into this legal quagmire risked fractures she couldn't stitch. The night deepened outside, the sky a canopy of stars, pierced by the distant glow of city lights. When the lawyer arrived, a lean man named Elias Crow, his suit rumpled from the drive, briefcase clutched like a shield. He spread files across the table, the lamplight catching the glint of his glasses as he outlined the path. Anonymous tip to the board, backed by the drive's data, forcing an investigation without direct confrontation. Pierce has pull, donors, connections, but patterns like these scream fraud. We file under whistleblower protections. Keep your name out until it's airtight. Elena absorbed it, the plan a bridge between her worlds, the healer's precision meeting the rider's resolve. Yet doubt whispered Jake's inquiry had promised justice too, only to deliver silence and exile. As the group dispersed to posts, Elena slipped out to the fire pit, the embers from an earlier blaze still warm underfoot, casting a ruddy glow on the gravel. The air carried the crisp bite of autumn, mingled with the faint ozone of an approaching front, thunder grumbling low on the horizon like unspoken threats. Marcus joined her, 2 chairs dragged close, the silence between them comfortable as old leather. "Remember that ride after Jake?" he said, staring into the dying coals. "You patched us all up in that ditch, hands shaking but steady. Said it was for him." Elena nodded, the memory surfacing sharp. The dust-choked road, the club's bikes circled like wagons, her kit spread on a tarp as she stanched wounds under flashlight beams. "I meant it. Still do." But her voice cracked, the emotional toll surfacing, the boy's whimpers last night, Harlan's shove, Pierce's sneer. They layered onto her scars, testing the honor that had kept her riding. A low rumble cut the quiet. Headlights sweeping the lot, not the familiar growl of Vipers, but the sleek purr of that black sedan, idling at the tree line. Elena tensed, hand instinctively going to her belt, where a small medkit hid a concealed blade, not for violence but the edge of readiness. Marcus rose, signaling silently to the shadows where Caleb lurked. The car didn't advance, just watched, its engine a predatory hum before peeling away into the dark. "They're probing," Marcus muttered, settling back. "Pierce, or whoever pulls his strings." Elena's mind raced. Rumors from her nursing contacts hinted at deeper ties, corporate vultures circling public funds, the kind that thrived on broken systems. Exposing it meant more than one hospital. It challenged the cynicism that had nearly drowned her after the war. By midnight, the clubhouse thrummed with quiet purpose, Lena coordinating with inside allies via burner phones. Tyler scouting routes for safe escorts, Ronan poring over maps for fallback plans. Elena retreated to her quarters, a sparse room with a cot, photos of past rides taped to the walls, Jake's smiling face in fatigues among them. She unfolded the letter under the desk lamp, his scrawl steady. "Faith in the fight, Doc, for family, blood or chosen." Tears pricked, unbidden. The moral crossroads stark. Retreat and preserve the peace or charge forward, risking the kin who'd pulled her from despair. The promise won, as always, a quiet fire reigniting. Dawn approached with a soft grey light, filtering through the blinds, the first birdsong piercing the hush. Elias returned with preliminary filings drafted, the papers crisp and final. "We submit at first light," he said, the group's resolve mirroring the rising sun. Elena clipped her viper patch back on, the serpent coiling proud, and stepped outside. The convoy assembled slowly, bikes gleaming in the dew, engines coughing to life in a chorus of defiance. Sarah's safe house first, a check-in to ensure the boy slept sound, then the ride to the board's offices, evidence in hand. But as they mounted up, a call buzzed. Lena's voice urgent over the radio. "Pierce is moving, he's got wind." Lawyers circling the hospital, prepping counters. The air crackled with tension, the ethical suspense coiling tighter. Elena revved her engine, the vibration thrumming through her like a heartbeat. Justice wasn't clean, it was a gauntlet, demanding sacrifice for the light at the end. With Marcus at her side, the vipers rolling as one, she led the way, the road ahead shadowed, but lit by unbreakable oaths. Redemption called, mile by unforgiving mile, binding losses to legacies of quiet, unyielding honor. The first rays of dawn sliced through the mist-shrouded streets like golden blades, turning the dew-kissed asphalt into a shimmering path toward reckoning. Elena Voss led the convoy from the clubhouse, her chopper's engine a steady thrum that synced with the pulse of her resolve, the wind whipping at her jacket as if urging her onward. Behind her, the iron vipers rolled in tight formation, Marcus Hale's massive frame cutting the air beside her, Tyler Grant and Caleb Reed flanking the rear like silent sentinels, their bikes chrome catching the light in fleeting sparks. Lena Torres rode point on a sleek scout model, burner phone clipped to her vest, relaying updates from the safe houses. The air carried the crisp bite of morning, laced with the faint exhaust of their procession, a scent that grounded Elena in the now, pushing back the ghosts that clawed at her edges. Sarah Klein's safe house was a modest bungalow on the town's frayed outskirts, its porch light still flickering like a weary beacon. Elena pulled up first, killing the engine with a soft sigh, her boots crunching on the gravel as she dismounted. The door creaked open before she knocked, Sarah appearing with the boy in her arms, his casted arm cradled gently, a sleepy smile breaking across his face. "Doc Elena," he mumbled, rubbing his eyes, the innocence in his voice a balm against the night's shadows. Sarah's eyes, red-rimmed but bright, met Elena's. The social worker came by, said there's a program, real help, because of you. Us. Elena knelt, ruffling the boy's hair, her touch light as a promise fulfilled. "You're safe now, that's what matters." In that moment, Jake's letter burned warm in her pocket. His words, a quiet affirmation, the forgotten, lifted one small life at a time. They didn't linger. The road called, leading to the state board's offices downtown, a squat building of glass and stone that loomed like a fortress of paper justice. Elias Crow waited in the lot, his briefcase a bulwark against the gathering clouds, the rumble of arriving bikes drawing stares from early commuters. "Files are ready," he said, nodding to the vipers as they formed a loose perimeter, engines idling low to underscore their presence without threat. Elena handed over the drive, the weight of its secrets lifting slightly as Elias tucked it away. "Anonymous submission, but I'll loop in a trusted investigator. Pierce's counters, they'll crumble under scrutiny." She felt the ethical knot loosen. The dilemma of dragging her family into the fray, easing into purpose. The club's loyalty not a burden, but the steel spine of her stand. Word from Lena buzzed through. Pierce was scrambling, his sedan spotted fleeing the hospital toward a high-rise law firm, tailpipe trailing exhaust like a fugitive smoke. The Vipers didn't pursue. Their way was vigilance, not vengeance. As Elias entered the building, Elena and Marcus leaned against their bikes, the morning sun warming the metal, casting long shadows that danced with the tension of waiting. "Think it'll stick?" Marcus asked, his voice low, eyes scanning the street for that black sedan. Elena glanced at the horizon, where thunderheads brewed, mirroring the storm in her chest. "It has to. For Jake. For the boy. For all of us who carry scars no badge can cover." Memories flooded her, the desert outpost's dust, Jake's final breath, the Viper's hands pulling her from the wreckage of that crash, forging her into something unbreakable. This fight wasn't just exposure, it was redemption, mending the fractures of failure with threads of unyielding honor. Hours stretched into a taut vigil. Coffee from a nearby cart steaming in paper cups. The group's murmurs a tapestry of shared resolve. Tyler shared stories of past rides, rescuing stranded families on back roads, patching wounds under highway lamps, to keep spirits steady, his laugh a gravelly counter to the suspense. Caleb stood watch, his quiet presence a wall against doubt. By midday, Elias emerged, his face etched with cautious triumph. "Tips in. Boards launching a full probe, raids on Pierce's offices by noon. Your data's the linchpin, they've got warrants rolling." Relief washed over Eleanor like cool rain, but it was laced with the psychological edge of closure, the corruption unearthed, not with fists, but with truth's quiet blade. The convoy reformed as alerts crackled over radios, sirens wailing toward Mercy General, news vans swarming the lot like vultures scenting downfall. Elena rode back alone at first, the wind a cleansing force, carrying her to the hospital's edge. She parked in the shadows, watching as Pierce was led out in cuffs, his polished facade cracking under the flash of cameras. Harlan Tate slinking behind like a shadow unmoored. No violence marred the scene, just the poetic justice of ledgers laid bare, patient stories rising like testimony. Sarah's name echoed in the reports, her boy's case the spark that ignited the blaze. Elena didn't approach, her work was done in the unseen, the promise honored without fanfare. Back at the clubhouse by dusk, the crew gathered around the fire pit, flames crackling high against the cooling night, casting warm glows on faces marked by the day's miles. Ronan raised a bottle, the group's toast a rumble of approval. To the Vipers, to Elena, to the oaths that bound them. She sat apart at first, Jake's letter unfolded in her lap, the words blurring slightly with unshed tears. Marcus settled beside her, his shoulder a steady anchor. "You redeemed us all today, Doc. Jake'd be proud." She nodded, folding the paper away, the weight lighter now, a legacy carried forward, not as burden, but beacon. The hospital's rot would heal slowly under new eyes, with safeguards for the vulnerable. Elena's suspension, lifted in the probe's wake, her role reaffirmed, bridging worlds once divided. As stars wheeled overhead, the fire's embers mirroring the quiet fire in her soul, Elena felt the full circle. Losses transmuted into loyalty, trauma into triumph. The Vipers weren't just riders. They were the family chosen in fire, their honor a light against cynicism's dark. Sarah called later, the boy's voice bubbling in the background, a sound of futures reclaimed. Elena smiled into the night. The engine's distant hum, a lullaby of roads yet traveled. Justice had revved through the shadows, emerging into dawn's promise, silent, steadfast, eternal. Thank you for riding along on this journey of honor and quiet courage. If these stories of redemption and chosen family resonate with you, please subscribe for more tales that remind us of the promises worth keeping.